for an additional $24 billion for Ukraine.
Where's the accountability on the money we already spent? What is the plan for victory?
But the consequences of pulling the plug on Ukraine are enormous. It will lead to more war, not less.
It comes as the U.S. unveils a new round of sanctions on Iran, targeting the production of Iranian drones used by Russia against Ukraine. One day after the U.S. sanctioned Iran's former president and other Iranian officials for imprisoning Americans, including the 5 detainees freed Tuesday, who returned to an emotional homecoming after years of captivity.
We've been apart for 8 years, and finally we're together, and it's just completely unbelievable.
NBC's Andrea Mitchell reporting there. Joining us now in studio is NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. Mr. Secretary General, good morning. Good to have you with us. So we had President Biden yesterday and President Zelensky both making the case for Ukraine, for continued support of Ukraine. There has been some wavering, even here in America, after a year and a half of how much money is going to Ukraine. How do you make that case that it is important and indeed an investment to support Ukraine?
Well, the main message is that we support Ukraine because it's in our security interest to ensure that President Putin doesn't win in Ukraine. If he wins, it will be a tragedy for the Ukrainians, but it will also be dangerous for us. It will make the world more dangerous, because then the message to Putin, but also to Beijing, is that when they use force, when they invade another country, when they violate international law, then they get what they want. So we will become more vulnerable if Putin wins. A win for Russia will be a win for China, and therefore we need to invest in our security by supporting Ukraine.
Among the many miscalculations made ahead of this war by Vladimir Putin is that the West would back away, that it would not support Ukraine in the way that it has. And in fact, your institution, NATO, has only grown and become stronger with the addition of Finland, the pending addition of Sweden, and perhaps down the road, as you've said, Ukraine itself. First of all, are you confident that Turkey will continue in its support of Sweden and that Sweden will, in fact, stand up and be a member of NATO?
Well, Turkey made it clear at the NATO summit in July, and President Erdogan stated also publicly that he will submit the papers for ratification of Swedish membership. He stated also that that will happen as soon as possible. And the Turkish parliament will convene later this fall, and I expect then Turkey to deliver what they have promised. And Swedish membership will be good for Sweden, it will be good for NATO, but also for Turkey. But it will also send a very clear message to Putin that he went to war because he wanted less NATO. He wanted NATO's door to be closed. What he gets is the exact opposite. He gets more NATO presence in the eastern part of the alliance, with more troops, NATO presence there. But he also gets more NATO membership. Finland has already joined, and with Finland in NATO, we have doubled our border with Russia, and soon also Sweden. So that demonstrates that he gets exactly the opposite of what he wanted.
So the reality of NATO today is very different than what people assumed it would be 3 or 4 years ago. Given your leadership, President Biden's leadership, it's a strong coalition today against Russia in defense of Ukraine. But what is the sense within NATO membership, within Europe, any level of concern about the potential of a return to the politics of the past, given the American elections that are coming up next year?
Well, it's not for me to comment on domestic political issues in the United States. But what I can say is that it is in the security interest of the United States to have a strong NATO. It's good for Europe, but also good for North America and the United States, especially if you are concerned about China. The size of their economy, the investments in new modern military capabilities by China, of course, is a challenge to all of us. But remember that the United States has something that no other major power has, and that is more than 30 friends and allies in NATO. Russia doesn't have that. China doesn't have that. And together, Europe and North America, we are 50% of the world's global economy, GDP, and 50% of the world's military might. So as long as we stand together, we are safe. We can tackle any challenge and any threat. And that's also in the security interest of the United States.
So you're a veteran of UN Week, when leaders from all around the world come together here in New York City, and they all have something to say, or try to have something to say, to have it noticed. Were you surprised at all about the remarks of the president of Iran, which are basically threatening towards the United States yesterday from the podium of the UN?
Well, we have heard similar messages from Iran before, and it just demonstrates the importance of investing in our security, partly by spending money, as allies are doing, and European allies are now really stepping up defense spending across Europe and Canada, but also by staying together in NATO, because then we are all more able, better prepared to deal with also threats and challenges from, for instance, Iran.
Mika?
All right, Mr. Secretary General, I'm curious, just to want to go back to the Sweden issue, because you have said, as long as we stand together, we can keep the world safe. Your warning of a long war in Ukraine. Isn't time of the essence to get the nations like Sweden this was supposed to be a done deal, was it not? What more can you do or say to get the two countries that are standing in the way of Sweden in line in terms of NATO unity?
But first of all, we need to remember that so far this has been the quickest accession process in NATO's modern history. Finland and Sweden applied last May, already in June at the NATO summit in Madrid. Both of them were invited. Finland is already a full-fledged member. Sweden has already started to be very much integrated into NATO, because when they are invited, they get what we call an invitee status. So they participate in NATO meetings, they are integrated into NATO military structures, and then I expect the final ratification to happen in Turkey soon, because that is what President Erdogan stated clearly when we had the NATO summit in July. So I expect Sweden to be a full-fledged member in the near future, because that's in line with what we have agreed as allies.
Curious, Mr. Secretary General, how you're looking at the long scope of this war in Ukraine, which is to say, President Biden has prepared the American people that it's going to be a long haul. We need to continue our support. Do you see a solution through Vladimir Putin, a guy who has shown no willingness to sit down and discuss handing back territory he's taken or pulling out of Ukraine? How do you see this in a year or 2 years or 5 years? How does this get resolved in a way that's satisfactory to you at NATO and to the West?
First of all, I think we all need to recognize that wars are by nature unpredictable.
Right.
No one can say today with certainty how and when this war will end. Surprises may happen. But so far, we have seen no indication from the Russian side that they're really willing to sit down and negotiate, agree some kind of just lasting peace. They're preparing for more war. So the only thing we know is that the stronger Ukraine is, the more land they're able to liberate, the stronger their hand will be at the negotiating table. So if we want a negotiated solution that ensures that Ukraine survives as a sovereign, independent, democratic nation in Europe, then we need to support Ukraine with military aid. And that's exactly what we're doing. So the only way to convince Putin that he can not win on the battlefield and has to sit down and negotiate a fair and balanced or enduring peace is to provide military support to Ukraine. And that's exactly what European allies and Canada and the United States are doing.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, thank you very much once again for being back on the show today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.